From the Miami Heat's forward denying there ever was a feud to begin with, to Jimmy Butler being nothing but positive about the guy in 2023, here's the truth about Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic beef. 2 years after the fact, and Miami Heat power forward, Jimmy Butler wants reporters to get over his alleged beef with Denver Nuggets' Nikola Jokic. Yup, that's right. I said alleged. And I'm sure you're probably thinking, there's nothing alleged about it. Thinking back to November 2021, when the 6'11", 285-pound Nuggets center charged at former Heats player Markieff Morris and sent him flying across the court. The refs had to step in and pull the clearly agitated Nikola away from the commotion while Morris was wincing in pain on the ground. The commentators kept saying, "Get him to the bench before anything happens," because everyone could tell something was about to happen. I mean, Nikola just attacked one of their own. There was no way Miami's players were just about to let it go. The camera then panned to Jimmy, who kept pointing at someone and mouthed, "Let's fight in the back." Now, common sense would dictate that he was talking about Joker, right? Well, apparently he wasn't. In the twist of the century, Jimmy Butler denies ever having a problem with Nikola. Jokic versus Morris was all anyone could talk about back in the day. Bleacher Report's clip of the incident grossed over 1 million views. I guess it helped that the video implied the Joker ended Morris's career. Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley also had a lot to say about it on an episode of Inside the NBA that was specifically dedicated to the altercation. Surprise, they were on Jokic's side. Yeah, so before the Nugget superstar sent Morris flying across the court, Morris kind of precipitated the whole event after that flagrant 2 foul. Charles claimed he loved the whole thing, and Shaq called Nikola's reaction retaliation. The picture shows a coach standing with his back to the camera, trying to reason with the guys, who, quite frankly, don't look like they came to just talk. Sharp commented how there was no way Butler and the guys would go through all that trouble just to call out a coach. I mean, what were they doing in front of the Denver Nuggets locker room then? Skip, though, wanted to give Butler the benefit of the doubt. The undisputed host reminded Sharp that it's not like the power forward to go back on something he's ever said, and that, in the past, Butler's always owned up to his feuds, like the iconic Grant Williams showdown. What do you guys think? Because there could be a third explanation for what Jimmy said. That's the fact that he was too embarrassed to defend Morris. It's like Skip said, Jimmy's not just some guy who pretends to be tough. He's a legit tough guy, and he wouldn't need to renege on his statements ever. Then why is he doing it? Because come on, he was clearly signaling Joker. They were living for it. The 2-time MVP ended up with a 1-game suspension for the incident. Morris was fined $50,000 for the foul, and Butler was also fined $30,000 for trying to escalate the whole thing. This might have happened in 2021, but the image of Morris lying on the ground while Jokic is pacing and Butler's signaling for war lives in everyone's heads rent-free. So naturally, reporters brought up the whole ordeal in 2023 ahead of the first game of the finals and asked Buckets if there were any hard feelings going into the game. He said there weren't any, and you'd think that it was because it's been so long, but nope. Buckets actually claims that he wasn't pointing at Nikola and that he has absolutely nothing against the 2-time MVP. He claimed that the individual he was pointing at knows exactly who they are. But, who is this mystery foe? During that same press conference, the Miami Heat's forward was asked how his team planned on stopping this Serbian giant. Buckets replied saying that they'd have to gang up on him. Yup, their tactic was to have 5 guys run at him at once and make sure there aren't any defensive lapses along the way. Based on how Buckets was talking about Joker, you'd actually believe he was telling the truth and that he really wasn't calling out the Serb back in November 2021. But then, who was he calling out to? Because he did challenge someone to meet him in the back, and he was fuming. Undisputed set out to figure out who exactly this mystery man was. Host Shannon Sharp was adamant that Buckets was most definitely calling out Joker. Skip Bayless interjected, saying that it could have been an assistant coach, since that was everyone's second guess, but Sharp didn't buy that for 1 second. They even talked about the photo of the decade. So, Skip was trying to make sense of Bucket's revelation, but Sharp was calling BS. He then started talking about the iconic photo of Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, and Dwayne Dedmon waiting for the Denver Nuggets in the locker room after the game. Well, a few fans believe he decided to deny the feud, to just get it all over with, since he's had more time now to look back at the footage from the altercation and realized that his teammate was in the wrong. Remember how I talked about Morris versus Jokic being the talk of the town, with Shaq and Barkley chiming in and actually lending support to the Serbian giant on this one? Well, they weren't the only ones who thought Joker did nothing wrong. Hey, even the commentators from the game called the whole thing a loophole, since Morris was the one who sideswiped Joker, right when he was about to make the shot. Fans believe that watching his teammate lying in pain with a stretcher being called out because it really did look like Morris couldn't walk, and the fear of Joker's tackle being a career-ending injury for him was something Butler wasn't willing to tolerate. He probably didn't even consider the former Heat's player did anything wrong. That is, until he got to rewatch the game later on and realized Morris was the aggressor and, in all honesty, probably had it coming. Like Shaq said, "I call that retaliation." Still though, while Jimmy might be willing to let bygones be bygones, Markeef's not one to forgive just yet. Despite many believing that a full-force tackle from a man towering over him would end up in a career-ending injury, Morris got pretty lucky. Well, as lucky as he could get, I mean, because his injury didn't end his career, granted it did end his season early, and saw him sitting out the next 4 months worth of games. All's well that ends well? Not really, no. Because Markeef isn't willing to let Joker off the hook just yet. A few weeks after being tackled, Morris retweeted a post that called the altercation wild, and said that there was nothing wild about it. The facts were simple: he was attacked by a 300-pound fat boy, who made direct contact with his spine. He also addressed all the backlash he'd been facing. In an interview with the Miami Herald, the Dallas Mavericks player claimed that it had been hard on him, having to see people who were once fans turn on him and accuse him of being the aggressor, or suggesting that he had it coming since he fouled Joker first. To that, Morris said that the guys over the internet didn't know what they were talking about since they weren't there. That's pretty interesting actually, because the few people who did end up supporting Morris all claimed that Joker was the one who had it coming since he'd been fouling players throughout the game, but wasn't being whistled out by the refs. They said it was probably because the two-time champ was being favored and that Morris did what he had to do to show the Serb giant his place. Morris actually defended himself by claiming that he fouled because he's a hard-nosed player, and that Joker fouled because he was trying to hurt somebody, and that's the difference people weren't considering. He then claimed that the whiplash from being tackled probably pushed him toward an early retirement. Even if he was back playing, he just wasn't playing to his full potential. So I guess Joker's burnt that bridge. But it looks like Buckets and the Nuggets superstar are on pretty good terms. Game 1 of the 2023 Finals ended with the Nuggets leading with a 104-93 win over Heat. During a press conference the next day, Jimmy Butler was nothing but high praise for Jokic. He said that despite fans often calling out the Giant for not making good use of his size and being a lousy defender, the truth was that Joker's play, both on the offensive end and on defense, heavily altered the outcome of any game. He'd have his opponents rethinking and strategizing halfway through the game, because you just never know with the Serb, he has every trick up his sleeve. His positive take on a guy many believed he'd been beefing with made NBA fans praise him just the same. Like this one guy who said, "If it's coming from Butler, it's probably true." So, from Jimmy Butler being nothing but positive about the guy in 2023, to the Miami Heat's forward denying there ever was a feud to begin with, this was everything on the truth about Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic's feud.